Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Okay, so we're now ready to move on with the tawabi', the extensions. There's four of them, and then one of them further divides, so the grand total is five. So he's listed these extensions within the places of rafa. Okay, he said the seventh one was at-tabi'u lil marfu', anything that's a phrase as anything that's part of a phrasal relationship with something that's already in rafa by way of extension, then it too would be in rafa. So in other words, two words together connecting and forming the fa'il, two words together connecting and forming the maf'ulu ma lam yusamma fa'iluhu, two words together connecting and forming the mubtada or the khabar or the ism of kana or the khabar of inna. You see, so this is part of phrases. So phrases, if you remember, I've been talking about this elsewhere as well, that the grand total phrase level relationships in the Arabic language is anywhere between 12 and 16, depending on how you categorize. So, but the tawabi are only five. He mentions four, but then one of them further divides and it becomes five, and we'll see that today. So what does that mean? That means that there's two kinds of phrases. When two or more words connect together and function as a single unit, then this can happen in two ways. It can happen where word A and word B share the same grammatical positioning, and this is called tabi'. The second one's called tabi'. If that's what's happening, if the two are sharing the same grammatical positioning, meaning that they're both in rafa, or they're both in nasab, or they're both in jar, or in the case of verbs, they're both in jazm. You see, and there's also phrases that are not like that, where word A and word B do not share the same grammatical positioning, but instead the first word fluctuates. Okay, this is important, pay attention. That the first word fluctuates based on how the phrase is used in the sentence, but the second word is fixed on a particular ending. And the prime example of that is mudaf and mudaf ilayh. So mudaf ilayh is a phrase, but it's not an extension. So you say kitabu zaydin, kitaba zaydin, or kitabi zaydin. So zayd is like fixed ending, but kitab's ending is ala hasab al-awamil. It's subject to the governing agents. Okay, so I think it's fine. I think we can continue. So Naʿt here, the author, he says قال باب النعت, the section on the adjective. النعت تابع للمنعوت. Naʿt is an extension, is an ism which is subordinate to the noun being described. It's subordinate to the noun being described in terms of its rafa, nasab, or jar. في رفعه ونصبه وجره. Now obviously it's not going to be all three. You're going to have to pick one of these three. وتعريفه وتنكيره, and then pick one of these two. So the grammatical positioning would be the same, and the definite, indefinite value would be the same. And then he gives the example: قام زيد العاقل ورأيت زيد العاقلة ومررت بزيد العاقل. So Zayd is definite by virtue of being a proper noun. The adjective was made definite by the al. Now the categories of definite will be discussed later. Once this section is over, he's going to move into the ma'arif. Al-ma'rifatu wal-nakiratu. So inshallah we'll cover that as well in today's session. And we'll try to get all five of them in today's session. Let's see whether we can do it, or maybe we might have to create two videos. At any rate, the commentator, Sheikh Muhammad Muhyiddin Abdul Hamid, he says, وَأَقُولُ النَّعْتُ فِي اللُّغَةِ هُوَ الْوَصْفُ. That the term Naʿt in the dictionary, it means adjective, what the English people call adjective. وفي اصطلاح النحويين, and in the terminology of the grammarians, هو التابع المشتق أو المؤول بالمشتق. It is the extension which is either derived from the masdar, like ismul fa'il or ismul maf'ul or sifa mushabbaha, like alim, ma'lum, or a word like al-hasan, sifa mushabbaha, or ismul tafdil. So it has to be mushtaq. It has to be mushtaq. أو المؤول بالمشتق, or if it's a jamid ism, then it could be understood through a mushtaq. Understood through a mushtaq. In other words, you can substitute a mushtaq and the overall meaning would remain intact. And the example he's bringing in. And the reason he's saying that this one needs to be either a mushtaq or a mu'awwal bil mushtaq is because the atful bayan is supposed to be a jamid. Right? The AKA extension. It's supposed to be a jamid. So when you have word A and word B, and A is a noun, like an entity, and B is an adjective, what the English people call an adjective. In Arabic, we don't have adjective. As in Nahu, we don't have adjective as a separate part of speech. So So it would be referred to as a mushtaq or a mu'awwal bil mushtaq. الموضح لمتبوعه في المعارف المخصص له في النكرات. Or you can say الموضح لمتبوعه في المعارف المخصص له في النكرات, which clarifies its extended one in the case of definite isms, المخصص له, and modifies and reduces the scope of it in the case of indefinite isms. So if it's Zaydun al-aqilu, then we already know Zayd. Zayd is particular. It only applies to a single individual. But when you say al-aqilu, then you've communicated something about Zayd, and you've done it without having to create a new sentence. So you've done it through a phrase level relationship, so you've clarified it. You've given some additional details about Zayd, even though Zayd was already reduced down to a single intent. Like the speaker cannot, it's not any of many, because Zayd is known. The assumption is that both the speaker and the listener are aware the identity of the person that's being talked about. So it's not a random Zayd, but it's the person. It's a particular person who has that name, right? Okay, so it's al-muwaddihu. So the objective of the Naʿt in the case of the ma'arif is to clarify the extended one, and in the case of the nakirat, the objective of the Naʿt is to modify and specify and reduce down the application of the man'ud. So any man becomes tall man. So now you've reduced the application and you've reduced the referential scope. Okay, I think this is clear. Now this next section is really important. He says, وَالنَّعْتُ يَنْقِسِمُ إِلَى قِسْمَيْنِ, that the Naʿt divides into two types. الأول النَّعْتُ الْحَقِيقِيُّ وَالثَّانِي النَّعْتُ السَّبَبِيُّ. The first is the literal adjective, the literal Naʿt, and the second one is the Naʿt sababi. Naʿt sababi, how would you say that? The associated Naʿt. So we have the literal Naʿt versus the associated Naʿt. أما النعت الحقيقي فهو ما رفع ضميرا مستترا يعود إلى المنعوت. As for the نعت حقيقي, it is that which gives rafa to a pronoun implicit within the VLE, within the mushtaq ism. Because mushtaq isms, they behave like verbs. So similar to how verbs can carry pronouns, the ismul fa'il would also carry a pronoun. Sifa mushabbaha would also carry a pronoun. And that pronoun is referring back to the man'ud. In other words, we have an adjective that's describing an attribute of the actual extended one, not describing an attribute of something associated to the extended one, like the father or the mother or like oh Allah, deliver us from this town, the occupants of which are oppressive, the citizens of which are oppressive. So رَبَّنَا أَخْرِجْنَا مِنْ هَذِهِ الْقَرْيَةِ الظَّالِمِ أَهْلُهَا. So the word al-zalim there is the Naʿt for al-qarya, but it's not giving rafa to a pronoun referring back to al-qarya. It's giving rafa to an ism zahir. In other words, ahluha, al-zalimi ahluha. And the commentator will give several further examples. Inshallah, this is going to become very clear. The point you need to understand is that there's actually a list of 10 things in which the mawsuf and the sifa are supposed to correspond. 4 out of 10. So you pick. From the first 3 you pick one, from the next 2 you pick one, and then there's the plurality, which is 3 possibilities, you pick one, and then there's the gender, you pick one. So the Naʿt Haqiqi needs to correspond with its man'ud in 4 of the 10 things in which correspondence can occur. In other words, the grammatical positioning needs to be the same. The ta'rif and tankir, definite, indefinite value needs to be the same. The plurality needs to be the same. And finally, the gender needs to be the same. The Naʿt sababi will only correspond in the first 2. In other words, the i'rab would be the same, the definite, indefinite value would be the same, and in terms of gender and plurality, they will not be the same. Okay, now this is going to become clearer as we continue with the passage. Inshallah, this is important section. Okay, so the definition he gives that the Naʿt Haqiqi is that which gives rafa. He should have said it like this. Naʿt Haqiqi is that which describes the actual man'ud, versus Naʿt Sababi, which is the Naʿt that describes something associated to the man'ud. Okay, this is how it's defined in the Hidayatul Nahu book, but he mentions the hukam, and he says that Naʿt Haqiqi is that which gives rafa to a pronoun implicit that refers back to the man'ud. In other words, is describing the actual man'ud. Such as جاء محمد العاقل. So al-aqilu here is a ismul fa'il, and ismul fa'il carry pronouns. So within al-aqil there's a huwa pronoun, and that huwa pronoun is referring to Muhammad. So since Muhammad is masculine, al-aqil is also masculine. They're both masculine. فَالْعَاقِلُ نَعْتٌ لِمُحَمَّدٍ. So the word al-aqil is not for Muhammad. وَهُوَ رَافِعٌ لِضَمِيرٍ مُسْتَتِرٍ. And the word aqil, since it's behaving like a verb, it's giving rafa to a pronoun implicit within it, تَقْدِيرُهُ هُوَ, the assumption of which is huwa. In other words, huwa pronoun. So you draw an arrow, you pull out a huwa. يَعُودُ إِلَى الْمَنْعُودِ إِلَى مُحَمَّدٍ. And that pronoun is referring to Muhammad. In other words, Muhammad himself is the one whose intelligence is being highlighted here in the phrase Muhammadun al-Aqilu. وَأَمَّا النَّعْتُ السَّبَبِيُّ. And as for the associated Naʿt, فهو ما رفع اسما ظاهرا متصلا بضمير يعود إلى المنعوت. The Naʿt sababi is that which gives rafa to an actual noun sitting on the left side of the VLE of the mushtaq ism. So it's an actual noun that to it is attached a pronoun, actual noun which is attached to a pronoun, and that pronoun is then referring back to the man'ud. So like أهلها ظالمي أهلها. So al-qaryati al-zalimi ahluha. So al-zalimi ahlu, so it's giving rafa to the ahlu, and ahlu has a ha attached to it, and that has referring back to the al-qarya word. So the example he gives here is نحو جاء محمد الفاضل أبوه. Muhammad, whose father is virtuous, came. Muhammad, whose father is virtuous, came. So Muhammad himself might be not very, he doesn't have admirable qualities. It's the father who's being praised here in the phrase Muhammadun al-Fadul Abuhu. But since this father is not anyone's father, but particularly Muhammad's father, so that's what connects it together. So that pronoun is important. So when we translate, we say Muhammad, whose father is virtuous, came. فَالْفَاضِلُ نَعْتٌ لِمُحَمَّدٍ. So grammatically, the word al-Fadil is not for Muhammad, but it's not Muhammad himself whose attribute is being highlighted here. وَأَبُوهُ فَاعِلٌ لِلْفَاضِل. And the word abuhu, the phrase abuhu, is fa'il for the lil-fadil. Marfu'un bil-wawi is marfu' with the waw, substituting for the dhamma. In other words, it's from the 5 isms that are supposed to be reflected in rafa with waw. لأنه من الأسماء الخمسة. And he says that. وهو مضاف إلى الهاء. And the word abu is mudaf to the ha pronoun, التي هي ضمير, to the ha which is a pronoun, عائد إلى محمد, referring back to the described one, referring back to Muhammad, who is the man'ud. وحكم النعت. Okay, now regardless of whether it's haqiqi or sababi, it has to correspond in those first two things, the i'rab and the definite indefinite value. So in other words, one from the first three and one from the next two. The first three being rafa, nasab, and jar, and next two being ta'rif and tankir. And he says that وحكم النعت. And the ruling of the Naʿt أنه يتبع منعوته في إعرابه وفي تعريفه وتنكير أو تنكيره. The ruling of the Naʿt is that it will follow the extended one, the described one, the noun being described. It's noun which is being described. In number one, it's grammatical positioning, and in number two, it's definite or indefinite value. سواء كان حقيقيا, and this is true regardless of whether the Naʿt is an actual Naʿt or is it a relative Naʿt. Okay, no. So a Naʿt of association. Okay, so sababi, I think that's fine. Causal, I don't think would be a good translation. So either an actual Naʿt or a relative Naʿt. I think that works. Relative works. ومعنى هذا أنه إن كان المنعوت مرفوعا كان النعت مرفوعا. And what that means is that if the man'ut is marfu', the Naʿt would likewise be marfu'. They'd both be marfu'. نحو حضر محمد الفاضل أو حضر محمد الفاضل أبوه. Okay, so he gives two examples, one for a haqiqi and one for a sababi. وإن كان المنعوت منصوبا كان النعت منصوبا. And if the man'ut is mansub, then the Naʿt will also be mansub. نحو رأيت محمد الفاضل أو رأيت محمد الفاضل أبوه. So I saw Muhammad whose father is virtuous. وإن كان المنعوت مخفوضا كان النعت مخفوضا. noun A is in jar, then the adjective noun B, ism B, would also be in jar. نحو نظرت إلى محمد الفاضل أو نظرت إلى محمد الفاضل أبوه. وإن كان المنعوت معرفة, and if the منعوت is definite, كان النعت معرفة, the نعت will also be definite, كما في جميع الأمثلة السابقة, as was the case in all of the previously mentioned examples. وإن كان المنعوت نكرة, and if the noun that's being described is nakira, the adjective would also be nakira. نحو رأيت رجلا عاقلا أو رأيت رجلا عاقلا أبوه. So I saw an intelligent man, I saw a man whose father is intelligent. رجلا عاقلا أبوه. Okay, ثم إن كان النعت حقيقيا. Okay, in addition to what we just described there, the correspondence in i'rab and indefinite value, there must be further correspondence in two further factors, and that's true for the haqiqi. The sababi would have a different ruling. ثم إذا كان النعت حقيقيا, in addition to what we just described, if the na'at is haqiqi, زاد على ذلك, on that will be additional. Additional to what was already mentioned is the fact that يتبع منعوته, it will follow its described one, its man'ud, in the gender, in its masculine or feminine value. في تذكيره أو تأنيثه, and finally in plurality. وفي إفراده أو تثنيته أو جمعه, in its singularity, duality or plurality. In other words, you have to pick one from the gender column and you have to pick one from the plurality column, and the two would match in whatever it is. So obviously the noun's gender is predetermined, and the adjective's gender is something that the speaker would need to accommodate. The speaker would need to correspond it by adding the ta or adding the alif makhsura or the alif mamduda or whatever method is used to change the gender of the adjective, because adjectives have changing gender, nouns don't have changing gender. The noun's gender is like set before the phrase is created. ومعنى ذلك أنه إن كان المنعوت مذكرا كان النعت مذكرا, and the meaning of that is that if the man'ut is masculine, the na'at would also be masculine. نحو رأيت محمدا العاقلة, over there both of them are masculine. وإن كان المنعوت مؤنثا, and if the man'ut is feminine, كان النعت مؤنثا, the na'at would also be feminine. نحو رأيت فاطمة المهذبة, I saw Fatima, the well-mannered one, the one with good manners. وإن كان المنعوت مفردا كان النعت مفردا, and if the man'ut is mufrad here means singular as opposed to dual and plural, the man'ut would be singular. كما رأيت في هذين المثالين, as you saw in these two examples. وإن كان المنعوت مثنى, and if the man'ut is dual كان النعت مثنى, the adjective will also be dual. نحو رأيت المحمدين العاقلين, I saw the two Muhammads, the two intelligent Muhammads. وإن كان المنعوت جمعا كان النعت جمعا, and if the man'ut is plural, the na'at would also be plural. نحو رأيت الرجال العقلاء, I saw the intelligent men. أما النعت السببي, as for the relative na'at, فإنه يكون مفردا دائما, it will always be mufrad. Okay, now let me give you the wisdom for this. So what you have here is you have a noun at the front, and then you have the mushtaq ism in the middle, and then you have a further noun with a pronoun after, like abuhu or ummuhu or ahluha, like in the Quranic ayat that I quoted to you, ahluha. So there's three things. So there's the person at the front. The person at the front could be, the noun at the front could be singular, dual, plural. It could be like I saw the brothers, or the brothers came to me whose mother is intelligent. The brothers came to me whose father is intelligent. You see, so now the word in the middle will not be plural in consideration of brothers being plural. You see, that only happens if it's an actual na'at. And since over here the whole focus is on the father or the mother that's coming at the end of behind the adjective. So over here, since the mushtaq ism is behaving like a verb, and the rule for fi'l fa'il is that whenever the fa'il of the verb is in the form of a noun, the verb will always be singular. I'll say that again. Whenever the fa'il of the verb is in the form of a noun, in other words, sitting on the left side of it as you would expect, then the verb will always be singular. So ذهب رجل, ذهب الرجلان, ذهب الرجال. So you don't say ذهبوا الرجال, you say ذهب الرجال. You see, so it's same deal going on here, same principle, same idea, that the mushtaq ism al-aqil will always remain al-aqil, but the gender fluctuation will still happen, but not with the noun at the front, with the abuhu or the ummuhu. Okay, now everything I just said is coming now. Pay attention. Like I said, this is important. Okay, so وَيَتْبَعُ النَّعْتُ السَّبَبِيُّ مَا بَعْدَهُ, and the Naʿt sababi, hold on. أَمَّا النَّعْتُ السَّبَبِي, as for the relative Naʿt, فَإِنَّهُ يَكُونُ مُفْرَدًا دَائِمًا, it will be singular always, because it's behaving like a verb, and its fa'il isn't coming in the form of a noun. In other words, not a pronoun. It's coming in the form of a noun. So like the ذهب 3 examples I gave, regardless of whether it's rajul, rajulani, or rijal, dhahaba will always be. But if you switch it and you say الرجل زيد جاء, زيد ذهب, الزيدان ذهبا, الزيدون ذهبوا. You see, now we need to change it, because now dhahaba is describing something that's listed earlier. So now the pronoun needs to be added accordingly. Okay, because every fi'l must have a fa'il following it, either in the form of a noun or a pronoun, never both. You see, so that's what's in play here. Okay, ولو كان منعوته مثانا أو مجموعا. So the Naʿt will always be singular, even though the man'ut may be dual or plural. So I saw the 2 boys whose father is intelligent. تقول رأيت الولدين العاقل أبوهما. You don't say عاقلين, because if you say عاقلين, then you've locked it. And now the intelligences of the 2 boys, but the point of the speaker is to describe the intelligence of the father, not the children, but the children's father. So something associated to the children, in other words, the parent, the father. رأيت الولدين العاقل أبوهما. وتقول رأيت الأولاد العاقل أبوهم. So أبوهما and أبوهم. So the plurality consideration of al-waladain, the fact that it's dual, does not show up in the aqil word. It shows up in the pronoun at the end. So the particular pronoun that you're attaching the noun to would be a dual in consideration of the man'ud being dual, or a plural in consideration of the man'ud being plural, like this رأيت الأولاد العاقل أبوهم. I saw the children whose father is intelligent. ويتبع النعت السببي ما بعده في التذكير أو التأنيث, and the Naʿt sababi will correspond. Follow here means correspond. Will correspond to what's following it, because what's following it is a fa'il for the VLE, because it's behaving like a verb, and fa'il correspondence in gender is important. So VLE fa'il correspondence in gender is also important. So if it's the father, you say al-aqila, and if it's the mother, you say al-aqilata ummuhuma, or al-aqilata ummuhum, if it was the plural example. Okay, look at the examples he gives. And in order to show the mismatch, he brings daughters. I saw the daughters whose father is aqil. رأيت البنات العاقل أبوهن. تقول رأيت البنات العاقل أبوهن. And the reason I'm saying al-banatil is obviously, right, because it's a sound feminine plural, and sound feminine plurals in nasab are reflected with kasra, not fatha. But the point of the example is not that. The point of the example is that aqila is remaining masculine, even though the man'ut is feminine. The reason it's masculine is because the upcoming noun is masculine. It's the father whose intelligence is being highlighted here. وَتَقُولُ رَأَيْتُ الْأَوْلَادَ الْعَاقِلَةَ أُمُّهُمْ. And I saw the sons, I saw the children whose mother is intelligent. فَتَخَلَّسَ مِنْ هَذَا الْإِيضَاحِ. So from this clarification, the summary is as follows: النعت الحقيقية يتبع منعوته في 4 من 10. That the Naʿt Haqiqi will follow and correspond to its man'ud in 4 out of a grand total of 10 things. واحد, 1 from the singular dual plural column, واحد من الإفراد والتثنية والجمع, وواحد من الرفع والنصب والخفض, and 1 from the rafa, nasab, khafd column, وواحد من التذكير والتأنيث, and you pick one of the gender. It would need to follow its man'ud in either masculine or feminine. وواحد من التعريف والتنكير, and one from the definite indefinite column. والنعت السببي, whereas the Naʿt sababi corresponds to its man'ud in 2 of a grand total of 5 items. واحد من الرفع والنصب والخفض, one from the rafa nasab jar column. وواحد من التعريف والتنكير, and one from the معرفة nakira column. ويتبع it says مرفوعه, it should be ويتبع منعوته. منعوته, this is a typographical error. ويتبع منعوته الذي بعده. No. Inna lillah. It's actually correct. ويتبع مرفوعه, and it will follow its marfu ism. In other words, its fa'il or its مفعول ما لم يسمى فاعله, because it doesn't have to be al-aqil. It could be al-madrub. رأيت الأولاد المضروبة أبوهم. رأيت الأولاد المضروبة أمهم. Okay, I use madrub. It could be mansur or any example. Ismul maf'ul example. Yeah, so what the commentator is doing here is good. وَيَتْبَعُ مَرْفُوعَهُ, and it will follow not its man'ud, it will follow its upcoming marfu ism الَّذِي بَعْدَهُ, and الَّذِي بَعْدَهُ means upcoming, in one of 2 items. وَهُمَا التَّذْكِيرُ وَالتَّأْنِيث, and that would be masculine and feminine. Okay, so gender is important, but in terms of plurality, it won't correspond. So you could be talking about I saw the man whose sons are. So now we're talking about like awlad are intelligent. So رأيت الرجل العاقل أبناؤه. رأيت الرجل العاقل أبناؤه. So al-aqil and abna are both masculine, and that's good. But al-aqil is singular and abna is plural, and that's good as well, because it's not supposed to match. Because in a fair fa'il environment, if the fa'il is in the form of a noun, the verb is always singular. Singular masculine in the case of the fa'il being masculine, singular feminine in the case of the fa'il being feminine, the marfu being feminine. You see? وَلَا يَتْبَعُ شَيْئًا, and it will not correspond in anything from the singular, dual, plural column. بَلْ يَكُونُ مُفْرَدًا دَائِمًا وَأَبَدًا, rather it will be singular always and forever. Wallahu alam. And I think he explained it really well, and you might want to reread that again. I think this is really clear. It's important, and we made use of this a couple of times in the commentary, in the sharah, but I chose not to speak about it because it would have been overly complex without this background information. Let me remind you, when he was talking about the muthanna, and when he was talking about the i'rab of the jama mudhakkar salim, he talked about the ya, that the muthanna is nasab and jar reflected with ya, and the sound masculine plurals nasab and jar is also reflected with the ya. But there's a distinction, because in the case of the muthanna, the ya is preceded by a fatha and the noon has a kasra. In the case of the sound masculine plural, the ya is preceded by a kasra and the noon has a fatha. Do you remember how he described that? He said that وَتُرْفَعُ المثنى ويرفع بالياء المفتوح ما قبلها المكسور ما بعدها. بالياء المفتوح ما قبلها المكسور ما بعدها. And its nasab and jar is reflected through a ya, that before which is maftu, that after which is maksur. In other words, the letter before which is maftu. In other words, the ya is preceded by a fatha, and the letter after which, in other words, the noon, it has a kasra. بالياء المفتوح ما قبلها المكسور ما بعدها. So why is this relevant? Because not the ya itself that has the fatha or the ya itself that has the kasra. It's the letter before which is maftu and the letter after which is maksur. And if you look at this carefully, al-ya'i is feminine. In case you didn't know, all the letters of the alphabet, if you want to talk about the ba, you say the ba is musta'malatun, or you say the al-ya'u is maksuratun. Ya maksur. You don't say ya is maksur, you say al-ya'u maksuratun. You see, but over here, bil ya'il maftuhi and not al maftuhati, the reason is because it's not the ya that's maftuh. It's the ma qablaha that's maftuh, and ma is masculine. So the gender correspondence is not between al ya and al maftuh, it's between al maftuh and the ma. And the ma qablaha is a phrase, and ma qablaha is referring to letter before which. Okay, because it's mawsul sila. And that's where we're getting the which from, in case you're wondering. Okay, so pause the video, think about that. Okay, post in the comments, how did you find this section, this segment on the Naʿt, the two types of Naʿt, and the way I explained it. Okay, and if you have any questions about it, go ahead, feel free, ask questions, and I'll elaborate further. Continuing with al-ma'rifatu wa aqsamuha, definite and the categories of definite. The author, the muallif, he says, قال والمعرفة خمسة أشياء. The ma'rifah is 5 things. Other methodologies mention 7. Okay, and the reason they mention 7 is because ismul ishara and ismul mawsul are categorized separately. Over here he says mubhamat, al-mubham, wal ismul mubham, and then within al-ismul mubham you have both the ismul ishara and you have the ism mawsul. So that would increase our number to 6. Okay, if you were to separate those. And the munada is also an example of ma'rifah, like a noun when it's evoked or when it's summoned, or when you stick a particle of evoking before it, you say ya rajulu. It's not just any man anymore, it's a particular man that you've singled out, and it becomes ma'rifah by virtue of the nida, by virtue of coming in that evoking structure. It becomes definite, you see. But the author, it does not include that here. Okay, maybe he'll talk about it in the mansubat when he talks about the places of nasab. The munada will come over there. Okay, does that make sense? So here they are. Here are the 5 according to the Ajrumiyyah. He says, وَالْمَعْرِفَةُ خَمْسَةُ أَشْيَاء. The definite ism is 5 things. There's 5 things that are definite in the language. What are they? Al-ismul mudmaru, the pronoun. نحو أنا وأنت. And then this would include all the pronouns. The rafa-based pronouns, the nasab-based pronouns, and also the jar-based pronouns, whether they're attached or whether they're separate versions. So these are separate version examples. أنا وأنت. It could be the tu in darabtu could be an example as well. So that tu there, if they ask you is it ma'rifah or is it nakira, the correct answer is ma'rifah because it's a pronoun. Wal ismul alamu, and the proper noun. Naḥu zaydun wa makkatu. So these are definite by virtue of being a name. They're proper. Wal ismul mubhabu, and the vague nouns. That would be the demonstrative pronouns as well as the relative pronouns. نحو هذا وهذه وهؤلاء. So this, referring to a masculine entity, masculine object or a person. هذه, and then we have هؤلاء, referring to a group. So it's a specific person that you're referring to, and it's not any of many. Okay, and the commentator is going to give a definition of what we mean by ma'rifah, and he'll explain each of these categories individually. وَالْإِسْمُ الَّذِي فِيهِ الْأَلِفُ وَاللَّامُ, and the particular ism in which there's a al at the front. So it becomes definite by virtue of the al. نحو الرجل, the man, and al-ghulamu, the boy or the servant. وَمَا أُضِيفَ إِلَى وَاحِدٍ مِنْ هَذِهِ الْأَرْبَعَةِ, and that which is mudaf to any of these 4 that were mentioned. So instead of the pronoun, you have kitabi, or you have kitabuhu, or you have kitabuka. So it's not just any book anymore, it's a particular book, it's my book. You see? Okay, or kitabu zaydin, or kitabu hadha, or kitabu rajuli. Like that. وأقول, the commentator says, اعلم أن الاسم ينقسم إلى قسمين. Know that the ism is categorized into 2 types. الأول والنكرة, the first is the indefinite, ستأتي, and it is coming shortly. والثاني المعرفة, and the second is definite. وهي اللفظ الذي يدل على معين. And definite is the expression, the word, which indicates something particular. وأقسامها خمسة, and the categories of معرفة are 5. القسم الأول المضمر أو الضمير. The first is المضمر or ضمير. وهو ما دل على متكلم نحو أنا أو مخاطب نحو أنا أو مخاطب نحو أنت أو غائب نحو هو. What is a pronoun? A pronoun is that which suggests the first person, such as I, or it suggests the second person, such as you, or it's used in reference to a third person, like huwa. وَمِنْ هُنَا, and from here you can tell, you can arrive at the conclusion that the pronoun is of 3 types. تعلم أن الضمير 3 أنواع. النوع الأول ما وضع للدلالة على المتكلم. The first type of pronoun is that which is linguistically assigned in order to signify a first person. And there's two words in the language that are used for this, that belong to this category. وَهُمَا أَنَا, and that would be I, which is for the singular first person. لِلْمُتَكَلِّمِ وَحْدَهُ. وَنَحْنُ, and نَحْنُ, which is for the singular first person that's venerating themselves, or along with that speaker, there's another like him, or there's another sharing in the action. أو معه غيره, in other words, plural. So either, so singular first person, plural first person, there's no dual. Dual doesn't occur in first person. والنوع الثاني, and the second category, ما وضع للدلالة على المخاطب, is that which is coined, or which is linguistically assigned in order to indicate the audience, in order to indicate the second person. وهو خمسة ألفاظ, and there's 5 words in the language that are used for this purpose, and they are وهي أنت بفتح التاء, أنت with the fatah on the ta, للمخاطب المذكر المفرد, for the singular masculine second person. وأنت بكسر التاء, with the kasr on the ta, للمخاطبة المؤنثة المفردة, for the singular feminine second person. وأنتما, and أنتما for the dual second person regardless of gender, be it masculine or feminine, مذكرا كان أو مؤنثا. وأنتم لجمع الذكور المخاطبين, and أنتم for the singular, no, for the plural masculine second person, in other words, group of males that are being spoken to. وأنتن لجمع الإناث المخاطبات, for the group of females that are being addressed. والنوع الثالث ما وضع للدلالة على الغائب, and the third category of pronoun is that which is linguistically assigned in order to indicate the third person. وهو خمسة ألفاظ أيضا, and this is also 5 words because the dual is common. وهي هو للغائب المذكر المفرد, for the singular masculine third person. وهي, and the word here للغائبة المؤنثة المفردة, for the singular feminine third person. وهما, and the pronoun هما للمثنى الغائب, for the third person dual مطلقا regardless, مذكرا كان أو مؤنثا, be it masculine or be it feminine. وهم لجمع الذكور الغائبين, and hum for the group of third person males. وهن لجمع الإناث الغائبات, for the group of third person females. وتقدم هذا البيان, and what we've told you here came earlier in the book already. في بحث الفاعل, in the discussion on the fa'il. وفي بحث المبتدأ والخبر, and also in the discussion on the mubtada and the khabar. Okay, so that's everything about the pronoun. القسم الثاني من المعرفة العلم, and the second type of معرفة is the proper noun. وهو ما يدل على معين, and it is that which indicates something specific, بدون احتياج, without any need of a context of first person, second person, or any other such context. So there's no need for, you don't have to be referring to anything. You just say the word, and the person who's aware of the linguistic assignment will understand it straight away. Okay, إلى قرين, so it's not in need of the context of the speaker saying it themselves, or the one being spoken to, the pronoun being directed towards that person, or to some third party. No need for that. وهو نوعان, and the alam is of 2 types, مذكر نحو محمد وإبراهيم وجبل. ومؤنث, and feminine, such as Fatima, Zainab, and Mecca. So he gives human being examples, and then he gives a non-human example, because masculine and feminine gender applies to inanimate objects as well, and they would need to have one of the 2 genders. And Jabal just what happens is masculine, and Mecca is feminine. Okay, not much more about the alam. Al-qism, and there was some discussion on the alam in the change restriction chapter, when speaking about the alamatul i'rab, the indicators of i'rab. Over there, when he talked about the ma la yansarif, he launched into the discussion, the commentator, he launched into the discussion of the reasons why words become change restricted. Al-alamiyyah is the main, one of the 2 main ones that render words change restricted, and that has to combine with something else in order to create the combination, because it has to be 2 from the list, and we talked about this in an earlier lesson. Continuing, al-qism al-thalith al-ism al-mubham. The third type of ma'rifah is the vague ism. وهو نوعان, and this further divides into two categories. اسم الإشارة, demonstrative pronouns, والاسم الموصول, and relative pronouns. أما اسم الإشارة, as for the اسم الإشارة, فهو ما وضع ليدل على معين بواسطة إشارة حسية أو معنوية. اسم الإشارة is that which is coined in order to indicate a specific thing by way of a physical gesture or an understood reference. Okay, إشارة حسية أو معنوية. وله ألفاظ معينة, and there's particular words that are used for this purpose, and they are وهي هذا للمذكر المفرد, هذا for the singular masculine, وهذه للمفردة المؤنثة for the singular feminine, وهذان أو هذين, and the هذان أو هذين, which is, it's معرب, it actually fluctuates. There's two versions of it. There's the Rafa version and there's the Nasab and Jar version. وهذان أو هذين للمثنى المذكر for the dual masculine. وهاتان أو هاتين للمثنى المؤنث for the feminine dual. هاتان أو هاتين. And هؤلاء for the plural, regardless of gender of who's being talked about, group of males, group of females, doesn't matter. هؤلاء is what's used to refer to them. وأما الاسم الموصول, and as for the اسم موصول, فهو ما يدل على معين, and it is that which indicates something specific by way of either a sentence or a quasi-sentence, a sentence or something that's in the power of a sentence, a phrase which is in the power of a sentence. تذكر, that is mentioned after it. So the موصول and then the sentence, the موصول and then the شبه الجملة. So either a jumla or شبه الجملة. Now what exactly does he mean by شبه الجملة? He'll tell you that shortly. Or actually, okay, maybe he doesn't. Okay, so a شبه الجملة would be like a ظرف or a jar majrur. A jar majrur or a ظرف. So you know that ما بعدها ما قبلها بالياء المفتوح ما بعدها بالياء المفتوح ما قبلها. So the ما is موصول, and قبلها is not a jumla, but it's a شبه الجملة. You see? Okay, I believe that's what he's referring to. That would be mentioned after the موصول. Absolutely, it can't come before. It has to come after. البتة means absolutely. وتسمى صلة, and this jumla slash شبه الجملة has a special name. It's called صلة. So موصول and صلة together are a phrase and function as a single unit. So this is a phrase. وتكون مشتملة على ضمير يطابق الموصولة ويسمى عائدا. And the sila will consist of a pronoun, a third person pronoun, that corresponds, parentheses, in gender and plurality to the موصول. So if it's allati, then we'd expect there to be a ha. If it's alladhani, then we'd expect there to be a huma. If it's alladina, then we'd expect there to be a hum somewhere, or a waw. If it's within the verb, it would be a waw. Now it could be a rafa based pronoun, it could be a nasab based pronoun, or it could be a jar based pronoun. That doesn't matter, but it has to be a pronoun. Now in English, this pronoun doesn't exist. So like for example, you would say, this is the pen which I bought yesterday, and you wouldn't say this is the pen which I bought it yesterday. But in Arabic, you'd actually say هذا قلم اشتريته هذا القلم الذي اشتريته أمسي. So اشتريته أمسي. So القلم الذي اشتريته, that who there is the عائد. And as a FYI, when it's nasab based, the عائد is oftentimes omitted. So you can reduce that and say هذا القلم الذي اشتريت أمسي, which is اشتريته أمسي. And this happens quite frequently. Okay, so what do we know? So we have this موصول, and موصول is the ism that indicates something specific by way of a sentence or a shibhul jumla that is mentioned after it, and that shibhul jumla is called sila. And it has to have a third person pronoun that refers back to the موصول, corresponding with the موصول in gender and in plurality, where يسمى عائدا, and this pronoun is called an عائد. And you remember when he was talking about the Naʿt sababi, he called it عائد. He used the term عائد when talking about the Naʿt sababi. And I think you can see why he did that. At any rate, let's continue. وَلَهُ أَلْفَاظٌ مُعَيَّنَةٌ, and موصول also has particular words that are used for this purpose. وَهِيَ الَّذِي لِلْمُفْرَدِ الْمُذَكَّرِ, and that would be الَّذِي for the singular masculine, وَالَّتِي لِلْمُفْرَدَةِ الْمُؤَنَّثَةِ, and allati for the singular feminine, واللذان أو اللذين, and اللذان or اللذين for the dual masculine, للمثنى المذكر, واللتان أو اللتين, and اللتان and or اللتين for the dual feminine, للمثنى المؤنث, والذين, not والذين والذون, it's والذين, it's just والذين. So this one's mabni. لجمع الذكور for the group of males, واللائي for the group of females, لجمع الإناث. القسم الرابع, the fourth category of معرفة is المحلى بالألف واللام, that which is adorned with the alif lam. In other words, it's made معرفة by way of the al at the front. وهو كل اسم اقترنت به al, and it is every ism to the beginning of which is attached an al. فأفادته التعريف, the al then granting to it the benefit of definiteness. So earlier it was indefinite. By adding the al, it's now become definite by virtue of the al. So it has to be al at the front, and the al has to be granting a definiteness. So the reason he's saying that is because it's possible for proper nouns to sometimes have al as well, like al Abbas or al Hasan, al Hasan al Basri. So they don't say Hasan, they say al Hasan, al Fadl, which is a person's name, or al Abbas. So if you were to categorize al-Abbas, which category of ma'rifah is it? You wouldn't put it in the fourth category, you put it in the alam one, because it was already ma'rifah by virtue of being a proper noun. نحو الرجل والكتاب والغلام والجارية. So all of these, if you take away the al, they're all indefinite. So the al is contributing and is making it definite. Okay, thus contributing to it definiteness. فأفادته التعريف. والقسم الخامس الاسم الذي أضيف إلى واحد من الأربعة المتقدمة. And the fifth category of definite is the ism which is mudaf to any of the above, any of the four that were previously mentioned. فاكتسبت, so it achieves التعريف من المضاف إليه, definiteness from the مضاف إليه. نحو غلامك, so غلام on its own is any غلام, but when you say غلامك, it's become particular because you're particular. So your boy, your servant. وغلام محمد وغلام هذا الرجل وغلام الذي زارنا أمس, and the servant of the individual who visited us yesterday, and the teacher's son, or the teacher's boy, or the teacher's servant. وغلام الأستاذ. So he gives several examples to highlight that. وعرف هذه المعارف بعد لفظ الجلالة, after the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is the most definite ism in the entire language. If you were to create a hierarchy, or if you wanted to list them in order of their definiteness, the most specific, the most particular of the categories of definite is the pronoun, like the first person pronoun I, because it can only mean the speaker, it can't mean anything else. And then you have you, and then you have he. These are all very particular. Okay, now obviously the speaker can't be cryptic. The speaker has to clearly create a context where the audience would not be confused. But then the intent, there's no possibility of sharing. It would only apply to one, and that's the point here. ثم العلم, and then the proper noun. ثم اسم الإشارة, and then the demonstrative pronoun. ثم الاسم الموصول, and then the ism al-mawsul would be next on the list. ثم المحلى بأل, and then the noun which is made ma'rifah by al. So what's the significance of this? To know the categories of which one's more definite, which ones are less definite. What's the point behind this? Is there any practical significance to this, or is it highly theoretical? Is it highly theoretical to know the degrees of definiteness among the numerous categories of ma'rifah? There are implications to this. Like, for example, if you had a fi'al followed by two pronouns, followed by two maf'ul bihis, a verb that has two maf'ul bihis and both maf'ul bihis are pronouns, then the more specific of the two needs to be brought first. Okay, like you'd say, for example, the dirham, you gave me it. You gave it to me. You gave me it. So it would be like a dirhamu a'taytanihi. You don't say أعطيتني أعطيتهوني. You can't say that. أعطيتهوني. You have to say أعطيتنيه. So these are things that, there's some significance to it, but it's the application of it is like it's really minimal. At any rate, I think that's fine. The mudaf ilayh. So now among the mudaf ilayh, you'd follow the same hierarchy. So anything mudaf to a pronoun would be more specific than anything mudaf to a rajul, for example. He says, wal mudafu fi rutbatin mudaf ilayhi, and the mudaf would be in the station of the mudaf ilayh, illa al mudaf ila dhamir, except the mudaf to the pronoun, فإنه في رتبة العلم, because it's in the power of the alam. In other words, it's one level lower, because a person can have more than one book. When I say kitabi, I'm talking about a particular book, but I can have many books. Just like there could be many individuals that have the name Zaid. So it's not as specific of a pronoun. Pronoun is the most specific. So if a noun is mudaf to a pronoun, it's not the same as a pronoun. It drops down and is included with the alam. Okay, whatever strength the alam had in terms of ta'rif, the mudaf to the pronoun would have the same strength. فإنه في رتبة العلم, and Allah knows best. And nakiratu, this section is short. It's just like a couple of paragraphs. We'll finish this. The indefinite. قال والنكرة كل اسم شائع في جنسه لا يختص به واحد دون آخر وتقريبه كل ما صلح دخول الألف واللام عليه نحو الرجل والفرس. The muallif, the author, he says that indefinite is every ism that is that is spread out within its category. Every ism that is spread out within its category and does not exclusively apply to any one particular member in exclusion to another. So in other words, any of many. وَتَقْرِيبُهُ, and if you want a better definition that's easily understood, it would be as follows, that nakira is كُلُّ مَا صَلَحَ دُخُولُ الْأَلِفِ وَاللَّامِ عَلَيْهِ, is every ism to the beginning of which conceivably an alif and lam could be added. نحو الرجل والفرس. So rajul, if you take away the alif, it becomes nakira, and with the alif becomes ma'rifah. وأقول النكرة هي كل اسم وضع لا ليخص واحدا بعينه من بين أفراد جنسه بل ليصح إطلاقه على كل واحد على سبيل البدل, any of many. He says nakira is every ism which is coined not in order to single out one particular instance من بين أفراد جنسه, from among all of the individuals of its category. Rather, it was coined in order that it could be applied to any of many. ليصح إطلاقه, in order for its application to be valid on any member and on any one individual, على سبيل البدل, in an alternating way. So it wouldn't be like all of them together, because then that would make it plural. And we're talking about singular here, we're not talking about plural. But nakira would also apply to plural. So it would be like group of males, any group of males. Any one male, any two males, any group of males. نحو رجل وامرأة فإن الأول يصح إطلاقه على ذكر بالغ من بني آدم. Because the first term here, رجل, its application is valid on any masculine adult from the children of Adam. والثاني يصح إطلاقه على كل أنثى. And the second word, its application is valid on every female. On every female, on every adult female from the children of Adam. Okay, I think that's fine. وعلامة النكرة أن تصلح, and when he said وتقريبه, and the way to recognize it, I think that's what he meant, the author. وتقريبه, and the way to recognize it is كل ما صلح. Well, that's what the commentator is understanding from that. وعلامة النكرة, and the indicator of nakira is that it is capable. أن تصلح لأن تدخل عليها al. It is capable of al entering before it. وتؤثر فيه التعريف, while um, creating within it an effect of definiteness. So it contributes and makes it definite, whereas previously it was not. نحو رجل. So the example is not الرجل, the example is رجل. فإنه يصح دخول ال عليه, because the entry of al on it is valid. وتؤثر فيه التعريف. Not only that, but the al is meaningful, is doing something, it's contributing and granting to it definiteness, or creating an effect within it of definiteness. فتقول الرجل, thus you can say الرجل. وكذلك غلام وجارية وصبي وفتاة ومعلم. All of these examples, فإنك تقول, this should be تقول with a lam, not a meme, because you say as follows: الغلام والجارية والصبي والفتاة والمعلم. And that concludes this section on both the Naʿt, the two categories of Naʿt, Haqiqi, sababi, and also the categories of definite and indefinite. And I think we'll pause it there and we'll create a new lesson to discuss the next one from the Tawabi'. Okay, we're skipping all of these, the tamrinat and the as'ila, the exercises and the questions he's posing. Okay, so the particles of atf, we'll do this in our next video. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.